In Georgia, there's one warning whispered more than any other. Stay out of Lake Lanier. Georgians know the rule by heart. You don't swim in Lake Lanier, not if you want to get out of it alive. It might sound like a threat, but the numbers don't lie. Year after year, this lake has become a place many enter but never leave. Beneath the waters of northern Georgia's Lake Lanier lies more than just a lake. Many call the lake an underwater graveyard, a place where entire communities were erased. Unmarked cemeteries were swallowed whole, and a place where tragedy has repeated itself for nearly 3/4 of a century. But its reputation and history tells another story. Some call it the most haunted lake in America. Others nickname it the Lake of the Dead. But its story isn't just folklore, it's history, and it's crime and death. The nearly 70 years since it was built, more than 700 people have lost their lives here. Every summer, thousands upon thousands flock to this lake. The U.S. Sun reports that number is close to 11 million, which they say is nearly the same amount of people who visit Paris's iconic Louvre. So think about that. Millions of people visit Lake Lanier every single year, but also every year new names are added to the grim total. Drownings, boating accidents, electrocutions, jet ski collisions. Some victims are recovered, but many are not, fueling whispers that something far more sinister lurks below the water. And we promise it's not just a scary ghost story or old wives' tale. The numbers don't lie. In 2023 alone, Lake Lanier saw one of its deadliest summers in years, and with millions of visitors every year, the death toll keeps climbing. Locals warn of the dangers: debris, submerged trees, shifting water levels, but still, people vanish beneath the surface. Locals describe an eerie presence, and some swimmers claim to feel invisible hands pulling them under. Is Lake Lanier haunted, or simply cursed by its violent past? Or is it something else? Dangerous waters, unsafe conditions, and a pattern of deaths unlike anywhere else in the country. The truth may be more chilling. This man-made reservoir is one of the deadliest bodies of water in the country, a place where history and tragedy collide. This episode is different from our usual cases, but Lake Lanier's dark legacy is impossible to ignore. This lake has become synonymous with tragedy, mystery, and Georgia history. It's not just a story about ghost tales, it's a story about crime, displacement, death, and the chilling reality of a lake that continues to take lives one by one. Today, I'll be diving in behind the headlines of a lake that should be a safe escape, a nice reprieve from the grind of everyday life, but instead has become known as a watery grave and has built a reputation for the unknown. Lake Sidney Lanier is a man-made reservoir located in northern Georgia, about an hour north of Atlanta. On the surface, it looks like the perfect getaway. Nearly 700 miles of shoreline, tucked up against the Blue Ridge Mountains, fed by the Chattahoochee and Chestatee rivers. It's where families come to swim, boat, camp, and spend their summers. Odds are, if you're from Georgia, you've probably been there yourself. And Lake Lanier isn't just famous for its dark history, it also holds the title of the largest lake in the Peach State, stretching across 5 counties in North Georgia. It spans nearly 38,000 acres of water, and today it dwarfs every other lake in the state. Its size alone helps explain why millions of visitors flock to it each year, but it also means that when tragedy strikes, the dangers are spread across an enormous, hard-to-police body of water. But behind the beaches, sunscreen, and the laughter is a much darker story. Lake Lanier has a violent past and a reputation that's only grown deadlier over the year. If you're a local, you know about the stories, you know about the deaths, and you know better than to test your luck. The warnings are everywhere, yet the deaths keep piling up. Some say it's the lake's tragic history that cursed these waters. Some say it's the hazardous lake conditions. Others think it's just a coincidence. Either way, the numbers don't lie. Many who enter Lake Lanier never come back. Since its creation in 1956, Lake Lanier has been tied to an unsettling number of deaths. While the exact total isn't concrete, most sources put it around 700 lives. These tragedies haven't come from a single catastrophic event, but from a steady stream of drownings, boating accidents, and freak mishaps that have stacked up over decades. Georgia DNR records alone show that between 1999 and 2018, there were 145 drownings and 57 boating fatalities, and the danger hasn't slowed down. In 2023, the lake recorded 13 drownings, marking one of its deadliest years in recent memory. Despite being one of Georgia's most visited lakes, Lake Lanier remains exceptionally dangerous. In 2017, a representative from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources suggested the high death toll was simply due to the lake's popularity. Yet when compared to other busy lakes in the state, the numbers are startling. Lake Lanier is only slightly more visited than Lake Oconee, and the state's second most popular lake, but its fatalities are nearly twice as high. Nearby Lake Allatoona, just 40 miles west of Lake Lanier, attracts a large number of visitors as well, yet sees only about a third of the deaths, highlighting just how unusually high the death toll is at Lake Lanier in particular. This stark contrast leaves people wondering, are these tragedies simply the grim reality of overcrowded waters and reckless boating, or is there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface of Lake Lanier? Since its creation, Lake Lanier has built a reputation for beauty and tragedy. But to really understand why this place carries such heavy energy and an unsettling aura, we have to first look at what was here before the water ever filled the valley. Beneath the surface lies more than just trees and roads, an actual ghost town, a community violently erased from Georgia's history. Though the ghost town has nearly faded from memory, its story lingers, shaping the lake's dark reputation. Some say that dark history may play a role in why this lake feels different, why the death toll is so high, and why its story doesn't read or even feel like other lakes. Before Lake Lanier ever existed, the land beneath was home to Oscarville, a thriving black community in Forsyth County. Formed during Reconstruction in the late 1800s, Oscarville was a place where freed men and their families built new lives after the Civil War. It was more than just farmland. It was opportunity. It was a chance at a new life. Many of the residents were formerly enslaved people or descendants of those who had been, and a significant number owned their own land. And not only did most families in this town own land, but many ran their own businesses and raised livestock. This predominantly black community was actively trying to carve out stability during a time when most of the South was still hostile. At its height, the town had more than 1,000 residents: carpenters, blacksmiths, bricklayers, people who had created something rare in the Jim Crow South: prosperity and independence. But Oscarville's story doesn't end in prosperity. It ends in terror, bloodshed, and the kind of violence that leaves the entire community shattered and many dead. In September 1912, 2 assaults on white women in Forsyth County ignited a chain of events that would forever scar the area, eventually leading to what many believe is a curse over the area, which is now home to Lake Lanier. The first case involved 22-year-old Aline Grice, a woman who reportedly woke to find a black man in her bedroom, claiming that he had sexually assaulted her. 5 black men were arrested days later in connection with this assault, but tensions in the town really escalated when a local black preacher who made disparaging remarks about the victim, allegedly calling her a sorry white woman, was viciously beaten by other townspeople. To protect him from the growing mob, authorities locked him in the courthouse overnight, even though he wasn't to be charged or arrested for this crime. Fearing a race riot might break out, which actually eventually did happen, Governor Joseph Mackey Brown declared martial law. The town sheriff then arranged for the 5 men arrested in connection to this assault to be moved to the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta for their own safety and protection. Then just days later, teenager May Crow, some sources say she was 18 while others say she was 19, was found brutally beaten, raped, and left for dead in the woods near Browns Bridge Road. The young girl was found lying face down in a pool of her own blood with her throat slashed, but she ended up surviving for 2 weeks, barely clinging to life before succumbing to her injuries. Not too long after her death, investigators would link 16-year-old Ernest Knox to the crime after finding a pocket mirror at the scene where May had been found. Officers learned that the pocket mirror was allegedly sold to him at a local store, tying the teen to the crime. Under duress, Ernest Knox reportedly confessed to attacking and brutally assaulting the girl, but according to him, he didn't act alone. He told investigators that he returned to the scene of the crime where May's body was found with 3 acquaintances of his so that the men could, quote, satisfy their lustful passions on the girl. And as you can imagine, the response from the white residents of the town was swift and deadly. Rob Edwards, one of the men Ernest Knox implicated, was seized by a white mob, beaten, shot, and hanged from a telephone pole in the town square. The public display was gruesome. The Atlanta Georgian, a local newspaper that circulated until 1939, described his body as mangled into something hardly resembling a human form. Meanwhile, Ernest Knox and one of the other men he implicated were tried by an all-white jury, quickly convicted and sentenced to death. Though the law at the time prohibited public executions, the night before their hanging, an angry mob actually set the fence around the gallows on fire so that the teens' deaths would be fully exposed to a crowd, estimated between 5,000 and 8,000 people, a majority of the county's population. They wanted these deaths to become a spectacle and a threat. But the terror didn't stop there. In the following months, groups of white vigilantes known as the Night Riders roamed the county, warning black residents to leave or face death. Homes were shot up, churches were set on fire, livestock slaughtered, and families who had lived on their land and in the town for generations were forcibly expelled and were driven out by gunpoint, forced to leave their home. Within a matter of weeks, it's estimated that 98% of Forsyth County's black population fled, leaving behind land, their farms, their businesses, their livelihoods, and the life they had painstakingly built. Oral histories passed down to future generations would describe black families running for their lives, some even chased to the banks of the Chattahoochee River, never to return. Many escaped to nearby towns like Gainesville, but many others didn't survive at all.
Night riders came through. They had to leave everything. The main thing they left was property, and my grandfather had 100 acres.
Rucker says many relatives died as they tried to flee.
So when they got to the Chattahoochee River, from what I understand, they were told, the mob got up on the bridge, they were told that they either had to swim or drown. Most of them didn't make it. My grandfather, one of them that did make it, he lost some brothers and sisters.
He says his relatives who survived settled in Gainesville.
From what my mother told me, buried all of them. He would sit and tell her this story, and he would just sit and cry.
Crosby says whites in the area took over the remaining properties. She says Oscarville farmers were specifically skilled in raising poultry, which set the pace for Gainesville eventually becoming poultry capital of the world.
You have a farm already going, and you had free land, so you just take it.
Rucker says his great-grandfather married his second wife, Beulah, and they built this school that still stands in Gainesville today.
One of the justifications the white mob used to reclaim the land was a legal idea called adverse possession. Adverse possession is a law that allows someone to claim ownership of the land if they openly occupy it for a certain amount of time without the original owner stopping them. Essentially, the mob argued that because they were now living on the land and the black residents had been forced out, the land legally belonged to them, even though the black townspeople had originally owned and lived on it. This shows how the mob used the law to try to make their takeover of Oscarville seem legal. Many people misunderstand adverse possession and think this law lets anyone take land, but the law is actually meant for abandoned or neglected property, not for taking land from people who already live there. In Oscarville, the white mob twisted this idea to justify forcing black residents out and claiming their land, making their violent takeover seem legal. The term sounds official, but simply living on land does not give someone ownership, especially when the rightful owners are forcibly removed. Today, courts would reject this kind of claim because adverse possession has strict rules and cannot be used to justify eviction or racial violence. But back then, in practice, the law often didn't protect black residents at all. Leola Strickland Evans was just 3 years old when her family, along with much of the black community, was violently driven from Forsyth County. Decades later, she remained determined to ensure that the story of what happened to her family and their neighbors was not erased from Georgia's history. Her daughter, Maddie Conley, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, "My mother was one of them. She shared with me that they run us out and all I had was my little doll. Every year, she made sure her girls had a doll. By the time she passed, she had a bed full of them." Leola carried the weight of those memories throughout her entire life, ensuring that the history of their community and its pain was never forgotten. So by the end of 1912, Oscarville was no longer a thriving community. It was basically a ghost town. Its residents scattered, its story buried underneath fear and racial violence. And just a few decades later, what remained of that town, its abandoned homes, its land, and even its cemeteries would be drowned forever when the government flooded the valley to create what is now known as Lake Lanier. But Oscarville's story of displacement of its black community wasn't the first tragedy on these lands. Before the town of Oscarville ever existed, in the 1830s, the land around what is now Lake Lanier was already scarred by displacement. Long before black families built their homes, farms, and their entire lives here, the Cherokee Nation was forcibly removed from Forsyth County especially in the land which would later become Oscarville and other areas of northern Georgia in 1838, part of the infamous Trail of Tears. Now, a quick history lesson for those of you unaware of what the Trail of Tears is. Back in 1838 and 1839, U.S. troops pressured by the state of Georgia forced the Cherokee Nation off their ancestral homeland. This mass removal, now known as the Trail of Tears, pushed thousands of Cherokee people west to what we now consider to be Oklahoma. The driving forces were greed and prejudice. White settlers wanted more farmland for cotton. They wanted access to the gold discovered on Cherokee land, and many simply didn't see Native communities as having a right to remain. Thousands of Cherokee people died on that brutal march, and those who survived were permanently cut off from their homeland. Entire communities were uprooted, lives destroyed, and ancestral homelands lost forever.
The horror of witnessing the destruction of the Cherokees.
When the soldiers arrived, Mavis Deering's grandmother was there and told her what happened.
She said that the soldiers came and said, "It's time for you to go." So they were only allowed to leave with the clothing they had on their backs. They couldn't take anything with them on this trip. And she said that after they had walked a good part of the day, they were going uphill, that they looked back and they could see their homes down in the valley. And she said that they could see their animals standing in the yard, see their homes. So it was a sad experience, a traumatic experience for all of them.
For Ramona Bear Taylor, the words to describe that time come slowly and painfully.
There was so much, I guess, harsh treatment that was done to our people when they were forced out of their homelands and put into stockades. They say that that the eternal flame or the sacred fire that our people have, as long as the fire burns, the Cherokee people will survive. And that fire is still burning today.
But the treaty that made this all legal, that's where things get especially dark. It's called the Treaty of Nichole, and it was signed by just a small group of Cherokee leaders, most of whom didn't even have the authority to represent their own people. According to historians, the U.S. government was fully aware that the majority of the Cherokee opposed the treaty, but they went ahead with it anyway. And how they got that treaty signed wasn't exactly honest or reputable rather than fraudulent. Historians say that when persuasion didn't work, government agents would just appoint a random person as chief and have them sign the treaty. And if that still didn't work, sometimes violence was used. It was more about getting a signature, any signature they could, than it was about fairness or any real negotiation at all. To the Cherokee, land wasn't something that you owned the way that Europeans thought of it. It was sacred. It was part of who they were, a part of their culture and ancestry. But none of that mattered. What happened to the government and to the settlers was that the land was rich, especially with gold, and they wanted it. Decades later, the same lands would be claimed by Black Americans who had fought for freedom in the Civil War, only to face their own violent displacement in Oscarville. Two very different populations, both minorities, separated by time but connected by loss, were forced from their homes, families torn from the only lives they had ever known, leaving behind farms, businesses, and legacies that would never fully recover. It's a heartbreaking pattern, one that foreshadows the dark waters of Lake Lanier, which would swallow the remains of Oscarville decades later. Many believe the lake's dark reputation and the tragedies that have unfolded there are tied to its history. The violent displacement of entire communities, stolen land, and the lives lost in the process. The echoes of those deaths and the racial terror that shaped the area have left a mark that is impossible to ignore. And even now, more than a century later, some say you can still feel it. That heavy, unsettling presence that hangs over Lake Lanier. Visitors talk about an eerie energy that seems to cling to the water and the land around it, as if the past never really let go. We'll get to some of those ghost stories in a bit, but it makes you think. Are people sensing the restless spirits of those who suffered and died here, or is it something else entirely? So, by the time the 1940s rolled around, Oscarville had been left abandoned for decades. The homes, businesses, farms, and even churches that once supported thriving families were left to decay, rot. But the story of this land and what would later become of it was far from over. In the late 1940s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began acquiring land for a massive project, the Beaufort Dam. The goal was to provide Atlanta and surrounding areas with water, flood control, and hydroelectric power, but to do it, they needed to flood the valley, permanently erasing the remnants of Oscarville and its painful history. Now, the Army engineers didn't just pick the area of Oscarville at random. The Chattahoochee River had carved out a natural valley here, low-lying land surrounded by higher ground, which made it the perfect place to hold back a massive body of water with a single dam. Engineers called it a storybook site. It was cheaper than other locations too, since fewer roads and rail lines had to be moved. And for Atlanta, the payoff was huge: a guaranteed water source, flood control, and hydroelectric power. But what was practical on paper came at an enormous human cost, because building Lake Lanier meant submerging everything that was still left of the communities in that valley. The same valley that had once seen entire communities driven out would now be drowned altogether, swallowed entirely whole. A second erasure, this time permanent, sealed beneath the waters of Lake Lanier. So because of this, hundreds of families had to sell their land, most under pressure, as over 56,000 acres were claimed for the project. Bridges were dismantled, forests cleared, and graveyards and cemeteries dug up. The Corps of Engineers made efforts to relocate marked graves, but historians believe countless unmarked burials, those of Oscarville's Black community, Civil War veterans, and even Native Americans who lived here long before, likely remained sealed beneath the rising floodwaters undisturbed. All of it was done in the name of progress. The Beaufort Dam and Lake Lanier came with a staggering price tag of $45 million in the 1950s, which would roughly be $500 million today. But beyond the dollars spent, the true cost was measured in erased communities and lost history. While the Corps of Engineers said they had moved all marked graves before flooding the valley, many historians and locals didn't believe that to be the case. A spokesman for the Corps even admitted to CNN, while the Corps made every effort at the time to locate unmarked burials, the limited capabilities of the time make it probable that unanticipated finds of human remains are possible. The knowledge that the bodies of ancestors were never relocated has fueled stories of unexplained encounters and lingering unease in the waters above, adding a chilling dimension to Lake Lanier's reputation, grounding the stories of hauntings in real human history and loss. And the labor for constructing the lake was just as grueling as it was dangerous. Workers blasted through solid granite to hollow out the dam's powerhouse, and many lives were lost in the process. Construction for the dam began in 1950 with a formal groundbreaking ceremony that drew Atlanta dignitaries. By 1956, the sluice gates closed and the waters of Lake Lanier began to rise. Much of what once made up Oscarville, its homes, streets, and buildings, was left in place when Lake Lanier was flooded. Homes, churches, cemeteries, farmland, and even portions of forest were swallowed whole, leaving the valley beneath a vast, man-made reservoir. By 1958, Lake Lanier reached its full level, hiding what was left of the physical remnants of the town Oscarville completely, and the painful stories of its displaced residents beneath nearly 700 miles of shoreline. Today, divers describe Lake Lanier's bottom as a sunken time capsule of the past. Intact walls, foundations, and stretches of roadway frozen beneath the murky water. On Expedition X's Lake of the Dead, investigators claim that as many as 20 cemeteries with headstones and graves still lie at the bottom, never relocated before the flooding. Their dive team even pushed to depths of 160 feet, searching for intact burial sites. But graves aren't the only remnants haunting Lake Lanier's depths. Divers routinely encounter eerie debris fields, tree trunks from once thriving forests, crumbling concrete foundations, twisted metal, even the ghostly outline of a submerged racetrack. Add to that countless auto wrecks and the remnants of buildings left behind, and it creates a maze of hidden dangers just beneath the surface. The lake isn't just treacherous, it's unsettling. Between the drowned cemeteries, submerged ghost town, and wreckage waiting in the dark, Lake Lanier feels like a place where history never truly stayed buried. Today, Lake Lanier is a recreational hotspot, drawing millions of visitors each year and generating millions in revenue, according to the Gainesville-Hall County Chamber of Commerce. In fact, Lake Lanier is considered one of the most visited lakes in the United States. Estimates suggest it draws 8 to 10 million visitors annually, making it the most popular lake managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the country. Its proximity to Atlanta, recreational opportunities, and amenities contribute to its heavy traffic, despite its notorious reputation for accidents and drownings. But it was never meant to be a playground. The lake was designed for flood control, water supply, and hydroelectric power, not boating, swimming, and jet skiing. As it filled, remnants of the valley, concrete buildings, car parts, and bridges were left beneath the surface. The Corps of Engineers assured visitors that these hazards posed no danger, but as water levels fluctuate, debris rises closer to the surface, creating unpredictable and deadly conditions. As we already know, beneath Lake Lanier's calm surface lies a sunken world of its own, a landscape of abandoned homes, roads, and remnants of cemeteries left behind when the valley was flooded. The lake's uneven floor and hidden debris make it deceptively dangerous, contributing to nearly 700 deaths since its creation. Drownings, boat explosions, electrocutions, and more. Many victims have never been recovered, leaving parts of the lake as mysterious and treacherous as the lost city of Atlantis. Even in recent years, the death toll continues to climb. In 2023 alone, Lake Lanier recorded one of its deadliest summers in decades, with 13 deaths. In 2024, the lake claimed 3 more lives, and so far this year, 2025, at least 8 fatalities have been reported, including a father of 5 lost while kayaking, and a 66-year-old man who drowned near a private dock. These numbers show that the lake's dangers are not fading with time. If anything, the risk seems to be growing. Yet millions of visitors still flock to its waters every year. These hidden dangers, they're not just theoretical. They have a deadly track record. Layered on top of the lake's ominous history, they help explain why so many lives have been lost here, and why the story of Lake Lanier is as much about tragedy as it is about recreation. Lake Lanier may look calm on the surface, but its waters are treacherous. Murky water reduces visibility to mere inches, hiding sharp debris, submerged trees, and the remnants of homes, roads, and bridges left behind when the valley was flooded. Steep drop-offs and uneven terrain make swimming unpredictable, while sudden changes in water levels can expose hazards that are normally submerged. The lake's origin as a water supply and power source rather than a recreational destination only adds to the risks. Divers and rescuers have long warned about the dangers lurking beneath the water. Local diver Buck Buchanan recalled one chilling experience he had while in the lake. You reach out into the dark, and you feel an arm or leg, and it doesn't move. That's creepy. Combined with heavy visitor traffic and occasional reckless behavior, these conditions have contributed to hundreds of deaths over the decades, earning Lake Lanier the nickname of one of the most dangerous lakes in America. Even natural factors like droughts or algal blooms can make the waters more unpredictable, creating hazards that are easy to underestimate and often deadly. These hidden dangers, layered on top of the lake's dark history, may help explain why Lake Lanier has claimed so many lives over the years, giving the lake an ominous reputation that continues to intrigue and terrify visitors. The majority of deaths at Lake Lanier are tied to boating accidents, often involving collisions, passengers falling overboard, or impaired drivers. The lake's popularity only compounds the danger. Thousands of boats crowd the water during peak season, creating a chaotic environment where one small mistake can turn deadly. While most of Lake Lanier's fatalities are linked to the boating accidents, the lake has also seen a disturbing number of boat fires and explosions. Engines have ignited unexpectedly, leaving passengers severely burned and sometimes airlifted to hospitals. Between 2021 and 2022, multiple incidents including fires at marinas and on boats with families on board were reported, with no clear cause determined in many cases. Electrocution is another hidden danger at Lake Lanier. In 2023, a young man was electrocuted after jumping from his family's dock, and attempts to rescue him were hampered when helpers also felt the electric current. Despite being pulled out, he later died from his injuries. These incidents, known as electric shock drownings, occur when electrical currents leak into the water from docks, marinas, or boats, paralyzing swimmers and making escape nearly impossible. These dangers, oftentimes random and unpredictable, just adds yet another unpredictable risk and layer to the lake's already treacherous water. But it isn't just overcrowding and alcohol that make the lake so hazardous. Even experienced swimmers are at risk. Divers say the water is murky, visibility is near zero, and sudden drop-offs, submerged debris, and hidden hazards can transform what looks like a calm, inviting lake into a deadly trap. Being man-made, Lake Lanier is unlike a natural lake. Its flooded roads, boating foundations, and underwater forests create unpredictable conditions that make rescues and recoveries extremely challenging. A division chief with the Forsyth County Fire Department says it's solely because the lake was never built for recreation. Its murky waters, sudden drop-offs, and submerged tree structures and debris create hidden hazards that can ensnare swimmers and topple boats. The irony is stark. Millions flock to enjoy its beauty each year, yet beneath the surface lies a deadly history that continues to claim lives. The Hall County Sheriff's Office dive team regularly ventures into these murky depths to recover missing boaters and swimmers multiple times a year. Even trained divers face serious dangers. They can become tangled in fishing lines, trapped by debris, disoriented by submerged structures, or risk decompression sickness while surfacing. Lieutenant Commander Chris Temple, who leads the team, estimates that about 24 bodies remain unrecovered in the lake to this day. The work takes a heavy psychological toll, as divers carry the weight of decades of tragedy, repeatedly confronting the human cost of the lake's hidden perils. But the human cost of Lake Lanier's hazards has prompted action. On the 11th anniversary of her son Kyle Glover's tragic death, Tamika Foster, fashion designer and former wife of Grammy-winning artist Usher, launched an online petition calling for the lake to be drained, cleaned, and made safer. In 2012, her 11-year-old son Kyle was critically injured when a ski jet struck him while he was riding an inner tube on the lake, and he sadly passed away 2 weeks later. A family friend was later convicted in her son's tragic death. Tamika's petition, which has now gathered over 15,000 signatures, calls for stricter safety regulations, proper zoning for water activities, and the removal of debris lurking beneath the surface. Draining, cleaning, and restoring Lake Lanier is not only necessary but also an opportunity to honor the memory of those who have lost their lives and prevent further tragedies. She wrote in her change.org petition, "Her effort is as much about honoring her son's memory as it is about preventing future tragedies. Her efforts show how the community is advocating for change and safer conditions, working to make sure the lake doesn't continue to claim more lives despite its popularity and scenic appeal. Hundreds have died over the decades, and the lake's dark history runs even deeper, fueling tales of restless spirits beneath the surface. And while there's no evidence that the lake is truly haunted, the stories and theories persist. Ghostly apparitions, phantom boats, and unexplained phenomena echo the real tragedies that occurred here, and this lore has become inseparable from the lake's notorious reputation over the decades. For those who know its history, it is impossible to separate the lake's beauty from the dark legacy of the lives and communities lost to its waters. Even with the practical hazards explained, murky water, hidden debris, and sudden drop-offs, the lake's violent past adds another layer of unease. The displacement of Black and Native American communities, coupled with hundreds of deaths over the years, have given rise to the idea that angry spirits of those who lost everything still linger, perhaps even cursing the waters. Whether true or simply just ghost stories told over a fire, these tales are inseparable from Lake Lanier's identity, passed down through generations and cemented in books, podcasts, and local lore, setting the stage for some of the most enduring and chilling ghost stories the lake has to offer. Two of Lake Lanier's most famous ghost stories are often shared like a warning, whispers of what lingers beneath the water. The most enduring and most popular is the legend of the Lady of the Lake. It was 1958, and two friends, Delia Mae Parker Young and Susie Roberts, were leaving a lively dance, dressed to the nines, full of laughter and carefree energy. They supposedly stopped for gas, but local lore says they didn't pay before driving off. As they crossed Brown's Bridge, something went horribly wrong. Somehow, they lost control of the car, and it plunged straight into the dark, cold waters below. A year later, a fisherman discovered a decomposed body, but it wasn't until 1990, more than 3 decades later, that authorities recovered Susie Roberts' remains in a sunken 1950s Ford sedan. That meant the body, found back in 1959, belonged to Delia Mae Parker Young, who was missing both her hands and toes. Locals say her spirit, dressed in the blue dress she borrowed that night, still haunts Brown's Bridge, wandering the span and reaching out to unsuspecting visitors, dragging them toward the water. Even today, Brown's Bridge had a reputation for strange accidents, mysterious car troubles, and eerie sightings. Some stories claim you see Delia's ghostly figure pacing the bridge, searching endlessly for her lost appendages, while some accounts suggest it might have been Susie in the dress. The prevailing legend identifies Delia as the Lady of the Lake, the spectral presence that continues to chill the imaginations of those who pass over these waters. The second story involves the belief that the lake itself is haunted. Late at night on Lake Lanier, some boaters and fishermen swear they've seen a shadowy figure drifting silently across the water on a small weathered raft. Locals call him the ghostly raft man. Rumor is he moves deliberately, pushing the raft back and forth with a long pole, as if trapped in some endless watery routine. The creepy part? Even when the lake floor is unpredictable, the raft man glides effortlessly. Fishermen often report sudden tugs on their lines or strange noises beneath the surface, only to pull up nothing at all. Those who claim to have glimpses of him describe a cold chill that follows a sense that something unseen is watching and waiting. And these two ghost stories are far from the only mysteries haunting Lake Lanier. Over the years, fishermen, swimmers, and boaters have reported eerie lights hovering above the water, ghostly whispers carried on the wind, sudden chills, and the unmistakable feeling of unseen hands tugging at their legs. Divers sometimes brush against objects that feel disturbingly human, only to find nothing there. Even residents near the lake speak of haunted homes, footsteps echoing through empty rooms, doors slamming on their own, and shadowy figures slipping through hallways. These unsettling experiences all seem to trace back to the lake's dark history and the hundreds of lives lost over decades. It's a chilling mix of history, tragedy, and folklore that keeps the legend of Lake Lanier alive. So, what do you think? Do you think the deaths at Lake Lanier are caused by vengeful spirits, or are they simply the result of poor planning and dangerous conditions? Or is there something darker at work, an unsettled past that refuses to stay buried? Or maybe it's both. Over time, the lure of Lake Lanier has grown far beyond its shoreline. What started as whispered warnings among locals has snowballed into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Paranormal investigators have flocked to its waters, ghost tours weave its legends into their storytelling, and Reddit forums are stacked with theories from skeptics and believers alike. True crime podcasts dedicate entire episodes to the lake's deadly past, while authors have published books dissecting its history and hauntings. Even pop culture has latched on. Rappers spit bars about the lake's alleged curse, social media influencers use it as a backdrop for eerie Halloween posts, and Georgia ghost tours keep the stories alive. The lake has become more than a body of water. It's a stage where tragedy, folklore, and mystery all collide. The legend of Lake Lanier and the buried town of Oscarville has long since spilled beyond Georgia's borders. Books, films, TV shows, and documentaries have carried its story nationwide, cementing it as both a true crime tragedy and a source of haunting folklore, traveling far beyond just local legend. In 2016, Patrick Phillips published Blood at the Root, a meticulously researched and deeply personal account of the 1912 racial violence in Oscarville. The author, who grew up in Forsyth County with white anti-segregationist parents, explores both the historical events and the lingering impact on the county's identity, offering a perspective that blends historical record with lived experience. And then on the television screen, Atlanta's award-winning series dedicated an episode to the violence at Oscarville, examining the racial terror and forced displacement that shaped the area. Then filmmaker Bob Mackey's Oscarville Below the Surface takes a dramatized approach, weaving the town's destruction with the ghost stories and haunting lore of Lake Lanier. Together, these works, literature, television, and film, cement the story of Oscarville and its tragic erasure as part of the cultural memory of the region, ensuring that the human cost behind the lake's dark reputation is never forgotten. The lake has even inspired horror and documentary projects of its own. The fictional film Lanier leans into the chilling lore of a haunted reservoir, while Surviving Lake Lanier, available on Amazon Prime and Tubi, tackles the true history of Oscarville and the devastating toll of nearly 700 lives lost since the lake's creation. At the close of Lanier, the filmmakers drive home that reality with a dedication to all the lives lost. Since its creation in 1956, nearly 700 people have drowned in Lake Lanier, in memory of everyone that has lost their life at Lake Lanier. The fascination with Lake Lanier even made its way onto Netflix in the show Files of the Unexplained. One episode focuses entirely on the lake's dark past and present dangers, digging into everything from the flood-submerged town of Oscarville to the modern-day death toll and the ghost stories that surround it. Through interviews with locals, historians, and even rescue divers, the episode frames Lake Lanier as more than just a spooky legend. It's a place where tragedy, injustice, and mystery all collide. And thanks to Netflix's global reach, people far beyond Georgia are now learning about the lake's unsettling legacy. What began as local whispers about a drowned town has now grown into a national fascination, proof that the story of Lake Lanier resonates far beyond its shorelines, and even the state. Lake Lanier is more than just a lake. It's a patchwork of forgotten histories, submerged towns, and hidden dangers, where the beauty of the surfaces masks decades of human tragedy. From the violent displacement of Black and Native American communities to the hundreds of lives claimed by murky waters, steep drop-offs, and sunken debris, the lake has earned a reputation that is as dark as it is enduring. And then there are the stories. Ghostly figures on bridges, mysterious rafts gliding across still waters, unseen hands tugging at swimmers, and eerie lights that hover above the waves. Legends that may be born of grief, fear, or something far older and more restless. Whether it's a cautionary tale of poor planning and hidden hazards, or the lingering echoes of lives violently disrupted and lost, Lake Lanier keeps its secrets well. For those who visit, the surface may glimmer in the sunlight, but beneath lies a chilling reminder. Some histories and some spirits refuse to stay buried. Beneath the seemingly calm surface of Lake Lanier lies a dark and turbulent history. Hidden in its depths are the remnants of homes, roads, and cemeteries, silent witnesses to lives uprooted, communities destroyed, and histories erased. Hundreds have perished here over the decades, while many have never been found. For Georgia and beyond, Lake Lanier is more than a tragedy. It's a graveyard of memories, a place where the spirits of those who were displaced or drowned are said to linger, restless and unresolved. The dark past of the land, the forced displacement of Black and Native American communities, the violent upheavals, and the flood that erased the entire town lingers as if it's woven into the waters themselves. It's easy to see why locals and visitors alike speak of ghostly apparitions, phantom voices, sudden chills, and unseen hands tugging at swimmers' legs. Every submerged tree, foundation, and forgotten grave adds to the sense that the lake holds on to the lives lost above and below its surface. And yet, millions still come to its shores, drawn by beauty, recreation, and curiosity. But each story of a life claimed reminds us that Lake Lanier is a place where history and mystery collide, and where the past refuses to stay buried. So let me hear from you. What do you believe is really behind the deaths and strange occurrences at Lake Lanier? Is it the deadly combination of murky water, submerged debris, and unpredictable conditions, or maybe something far darker? Could the lake truly be haunted by the angry or unrested spirits of those who lost everything here? Or is it just a mix of both the tangible and supernatural? If you've ever spent time on the lake and felt its eerie pull, heard unexplained sounds, or witnessed something you can't explain, let me know down in the comments. Lake Lanier continues to draw millions each year, but it's a place where the past may not rest so peacefully after all. It's a place that's claimed hundreds of lives and sparked legends that continue to ripple across generations. This has been Joshua John with Behind the Headlines, and until next time, stay safe.